Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last class of the semester. For many of you, it's going to be the last class you have to take. For those of you in Dr. Deere's class, sorry, going to enjoy one more class after this one. But so what's that? It's a test. My goodness, boy, you got a lot to look forward to then. Yeah. Speaking of tests, we have an exam coming up and a final exam. Okay. I don't want to clarify that. We have a final exam. Not everybody in this room will be taking the final exam, but we are having a final exam. So I don't want any rumors going around that Dr. Barnes is not giving a final. Okay. Anyway, please make sure that if you are not taking the final exam, that you submit your summaries to Brightspace before the exam takes place on Tuesday afternoon. If you are planning on taking the exam, first of all, make sure you take diligent notes on the presentations because there will be 3 multiple choice questions on the presentations. But if you are taking the exam, please let me know before the end of day today, just so I have an idea. If I don't see your submission to Brightspace, but you also don't contact me, I will be in a world of paradox. So that's kind of why I'm trying to make sure that everybody sends correct signals. So please make sure that you do anything that's necessary for you to whatever your desire of choice to take the exam or not take the exam. And yeah, that's pretty much it. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed group for their presentation after I fix the camera, of course. Should be open in Google Chrome.
Do I need to share it on Zoom though?
No, because the screen will be displaying what's on the background right there, which that will be the presentation once you go to the presentation.
How would I open that part?
It's the left one.
Yeah. So it's just showing the whole screen. Is there any way to do like 2 so I can get presenter view? Like that.
I should see a presentation. See it.
Maybe presentation display options was like under them.
Stay full screen. There we go. We got there eventually. What it was. 5 years old students.
All right, today we're going to be talking about AI CPA standards. I'm Doran Durbin.
I'm Parker Erickson. I'm Colin Mead. I'm Andrew York. And I'm Michael Russ.
Okay, to start, the AI CPA is a non-for-profit organization representing CPAs. They have 597,000 members across the globe and in both private and public practices, in educators, lawmakers. They're in 188 countries around the world. Today, they do standard setting and advocacy for CPAs. They focus on professional ethics, business valuation, auditing, and attestation services. And as you can see by the map, the places in purple are where they have members, and the places in red are where they have associations. Today, we're going to talk about 9 standards: audit and attest, the code of professional conduct, consulting services, forensic services, peer review, personal financial planning, preparation, compilation, and review, tax standards, and valuation services.
All right, for the standards, a little bit of background on the AICPA. So it was founded in 1887 as the American Association of Public Accountants. This was at a time when accounting was still kind of developing as a profession. So there was a need to kind of outline ethical guidelines for CPAs and accountants. And then overall just elevated accounting as a profession. There's a focus on professional integrity, The biggest goal from early on was to promote ethical behavior for accountants. And still today, there's a heavy focus for integrity in the field. And for that reason, and competence too, but that's the reason that CPAs are highly regarded in their field of work and in the business world. They were an early standard setter until the FASB took over in the 1970s. The ACCT set GAAP principles, and they still do. They've kind of transitioned to other standards that they set. I'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, up until that point, if you're an accountant or a CPA, the AICPA set the rules that you followed. And then finally in 2012, in partnership with the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, or the CIMA, they founded the Chartered Global Management Accountants, or the CGMA. And that's one of the leading global credentials for managerial accountants now. A little bit more on the background. This is something I found interesting. So the AICPA has a PAC that they use to donate to lawmakers, but they're also a lobbying organization. So they advocate for CPAs in conversations with lawmakers, regulators, and other groups, especially in Washington, D.C., that influence accounting policy. And they're often the main voice in D.C., and they just want to ensure that regulations are fair, ethical, transparent, and they're just looking out for the public good in that regard. Ethics standards. So like I said, they no longer set GAAP. That's done by the FASB, but they do set the code of professional conduct and they maintain that. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But just real quick, these standards, they guideline how CPAs should practice independence, objective, and ethical behavior. Other standards. So again, they don't do GAAP principles now, but they do set guidelines for the auditing of private companies, and then professional education, continuing requirements. Membership base is very broad. Obviously, public accountants and CPAs make up a large portion of the members, but public practice, government roles, corporate finance roles. Basically, you don't have to be a CPA to be a member. So yeah, other roles are involved. And then just their national presence. They have their 4 offices are on the East Coast in big cities like New York and DC. They're headquartered in Durham, North Carolina. This just reinforced their role as a national organization.
Now for current status, there are 9 standards that we looked at, and we felt that in the context of our audit class, the 2 most applicable and with the most going on simultaneously is the audit and attest standards, as well as the code of professional conduct. And it's important to know these standards as CPAs, not only so you can operate ethically and in compliance with relevant laws and regulations, but also so you can operate efficiently, not having to worry about not knowing standards. So currently, what's going on for audit and attest standards, adopting risk-based quality systems. It used to be rules-based quality systems, but now they switched to risk-based a couple years ago, and that allows auditors to really narrow in on specific risks for companies. So for instance, you would look at a tech firm differently than a manufacturing firm under this new quality system. ESG assurance standards are developing. As we know, investors are really recently looking into ESG when they're determining what stocks they're going to buy. So the AICPA, that's one reason that they have to keep developing these standards, and they're doing so. And new group audit standards are being issued. This applies to large decentralized companies that need to be audited. And with the rise of that, the standards have to change as well. Now for the code of professional conduct, it is worth noting that the 6 principles of the code of professional conduct are responsibility, principle, public interest, integrity, objectivity, and independence, due care, and scope of the nature and services to kind of just set the stage for this standard. Independence rules are actively being updated. This is being spurred by the acquisition of public accounting firms by private equity. There's a lot of conversation going on right now about the use of the CPA designation in regard to some non-attest activities. So rules are being discussed as we speak in terms of current status. No-CLAR rules govern reporting. This stands for non-compliance with laws and regulations. A couple of years ago, these standards were updated, and it gives more of a strict framework to follow in terms of reporting suspected fraud and non-compliance, things of that nature. And similar with ethical conduct framework is continuous. A couple of years ago, they adopted the conceptual framework approach as we know it now. And this just gives them a better set of rules to follow when they see suspected ethical wrongdoing.
All right, following up with the other 7 current standards and statements. Next is their consumer services standards. These are guidelines used by CPAs whenever they're performing analysis, recommendations, and solutions that are not full audits. There's a focus on professional advice without the assurance provided. After that is the statement for forensic services, our standards for forensic services. These are used by CPAs performing fraud investigation, litigation support, and expert testimony. An extra emphasis here is detailed documentation and technique use, as well as unbiased work. The goal of these standards here is to provide findings that are defensible in court and any legal environment. After that is the peer review standards. These state that all CPA firms must regularly undergo peer review by other independent CPA firms for the purposes of testing the quality of assurance and attestation work that they're performing. This is done to improve the overall quality of the work that the firms are performing, as well as boost public confidence that CPA firms are acting faithfully. Next is the standards for personal financial planning. These are focused on whenever a CPA is engaging with an individual. Examples are retirement planning, investment advice, estate planning, and tax advice. These are separate from the other standards because it's focused more on the engagement with the individual, whereas the others are more with businesses and corporations and their compliance with laws and regulations. And here the CPA must focus on the client's best interest. After that is the preparation, compilation, and review standards. These define the level of responsibility that a CPA is held to, the amount of insurance provided. The goal of these is to protect the financial statement users by providing clear communication of the level of work being performed, and to remove any doubt about the services being provided and that they are not audit or attestation work. After that is the tax standards. These are provide as guidance to CPAs that are preparing tax returns, professional tax advice, and representation of clients in to tax authorities. The goal of these is to ensure work performed is accurate, ethical, and honest. And the last is the evaluation services standards. These are guidelines given to CPAs for CPAs that are performing valuation services for things like assets, securities, and the value of their business. The goal of these standards is to ensure that the work being provided is reliable and objective.
Now we'll be going over future considerations for the AI CPA standards, focusing first on technology and AI. As we know, technology always develops over time, always has, still does, and always will. So it's important to consider that with the AI CPA standards. And one of those technologies is AI, which we all are very aware of, has been increasingly developing over the past few years and utilized by so many companies, auditors, and all companies alike, especially large companies. And with that, the auditing standards need to reflect that a lot of large firms are now using AI to gather some audit evidence and do some of the menial tasks. And the standards need to reflect that AI has to still be reliable and has to remain unbiased, which is what we have the code of professional conduct for, and that the AI needs to abide by that as well. And there needs to be proper checking of that. Along with that, there needs to be proper training for CPAs with data analytics, since AI is so prevalent now and used by companies and used by these auditors. When it goes over data analytics, it's important for accountants to understand what the AI actually does to go through this vast information, because lots of companies store information on their finances, customers, all parts of the organization in large databases. Instance, Amazon, you see they have those huge databases. And when we audit them and other companies, it's important to advance the standards to reflect that we need to make sure that auditors can understand it. And now digital assets, since they become increasingly, just like the databases, common, companies utilize this more and more with all transactions, especially crypto, Bitcoin, blockchain, and being able to properly verify these transactions will be important. And within the audit and assurance standards, we need to go over that, the proper way for auditors to do that. Along with technology and AI, which cybersecurity deals with, we'll focus on ESG and cybersecurity now. Over the course of the past 20 years or so, there's been a greater demand for ESG within our country and within worldwide. And since that has been, there's greater demand for assurance on ESG reporting within these large companies. Publicly traded companies need to release a report about their emissions, about their energy use, and it's tough for investors to be able to rely on what they're providing. So auditors need to properly audit those reports and assure to the investors that they're actually true. And the auditing and attestation standards need to apply that a little more. And since there's development of cybersecurity, there needs to be greater assurance around it, which is what SOC reports have done, which the AICPA does have control over. And when auditors go over these SOC reports, there needs to be guidance when the companies initially do those reports, and which there is, but continue to advance it with technology advancing, and auditors need to have proper ability to learn about these new cybersecurity threats that keep advancing coming along.
Okay, just to recap, the background of the AICPA, they were previously the AAPA. They focused on professional ethics and set gap standards in the past. Now they kind of represent CPAs, and they help build their reputation by creating things like the CIMA and the CGMA. And right now they maintain other standards like the Code of Professional Conduct, Audit and Attest standards. And going forward, they need to focus on increasingly digital factors like AI, especially with AI used in audit evidence, cybersecurity, especially addressing SOC reports and updating SOC reports to reflect that, and then using cryptocurrency and making sure you can verify blockchain transactions. Going forward, they need to maintain focus on ESG through updating constantly and verifying, and then maintain training over data analytics and make sure you stay updated on that, and then focus on using new tools like AI tools to improve auditing and accounting as a whole. Thank you, and here are our sources. And now, are there any questions?
Right. So one of the things that you talked about early on in the presentation, which is consistent with what we've talked about over multiple semesters, is that accountants have a responsibility to be ethical in their behavior. And that seems to contradict a lot of people's perception about accountants. There's a lot of jokes out there about how accountants are unethical and they're unscrupulous. Why do you think, when we have such an incredible focus on ethical behavior and ethical duty, we have just an inconsistent perception in public about that?
Oh, you want to get it? I'll go. Okay. I mean, me personally, I believe that it's because the position that accountants are in is such a powerful position, something that can be easily exploited and used to one's own favor. And I think the reason why we have all these standards in place is to prevent something like that. With absolute power, perhaps absolutely. So ensuring that there's like these checks and balances, and that we really emphasize how important it is to not abuse your power as a CPA. That's why those exist. As for why people still view accounts that way, I mean, there's been numerous scandals throughout accounting in its history. I mean, everybody can point at Enron and what happened there as an easy answer.
So you made the comment that the AICPA, their standard setting, or at least from the audit perspective, they switched to a rules-based assessment as opposed to, or sorry, switched from a rules-based assessment. Now, I joked in this class that generally accepted accounting principles are not principles at all, but they're actually rules because of the litigious society that we live in the United States. Do you think it makes sense for us to operate by a rules-based system for financial accounting and then to audit by a risk-based system?
That's a great question. In terms of just overall the benefits of the risk-based system, the way that I looked at it is like if you're analyzing financial statements, if you're looking at like a price to earnings ratio, you're not going to compare industry standards for a price to earnings ratio from, like I said, manufacturing to technology. So I think that it makes sense to have a risk-based standards when you're auditing. But like you said, like I could see having rules-based standards for financial reporting and a risk-based for auditing. I could see that why there would be contradictions there for sure.
Do you think that we run a greater risk as auditors if we don't operate according to a rules-based system, at least from a litigation standpoint?
From a litigation standpoint, I would say yes, but I still believe that based on my research, there are benefits of using the risk-based system just because companies have different attributes, and I think that's important to take into account when auditing somebody.
I suppose too, with the risk-based approach, it helps deter future risks, as we talked about throughout the class, where it's not just, it's about what the company does in the sense of not just our audit, but going forward for that, having the controls in place to make sure that things like that don't happen. So maybe that answers the question.
With respect to technology, one of the things that we were talking about in an earlier class of mine is that some of the technology majors at Truman State and other schools have become a lot less illustrious, so to speak, simply because of the advent of AI. And for context, when we're talking about computer science, there's less of a demand for computer science majors simply because AI can do a lot of the work that computer science people can do. Now, with respect to the AI and the data analytics and some of the other technology issues you said facing the profession, do you think that there's an increased need for skills in this area, specifically for accountants, not just in general, but specifically for accountants, or do you think there's going to be a diminished need for skills in this area?
In like the computer science area.
Yeah, so basically, I understand like AI, data analytics, cybersecurity.
Then definitely an increased need for that among accountants because just like in tax, they have TurboTax that runs a lot of your simple calculations. Like in accounting 221, we don't balance assets equals equities and liabilities. We go over to make sure that's in place. So just like that, accountants will need to have the understanding to be able to know what AI is utilizing and understand how it's looking at databases rather than us actually look at databases always.
In the suite of areas that you talked about, there were like 9 different standard areas that you talked about with respect to the AICPA. That's a pretty wide array of services that accountants can provide. We as a university refer to all these things that you can possibly do with an accountant as being an accountant. Do you think with the diversity of services, given our current day and age, that we need to probably segregate our responsibilities a little bit more and say, you're a tax accountant, you're an auditor, you're a cost accountant, and have better discipline awareness instead of just aggregating this all and saying you're an accountant?
Yeah, I'll answer that one. I believe so, yes, and I think a lot of professionals in the field agree with that, especially with the changes to the CPA exam being made with the primary, with the different tests in it and the primary focus that you're going into in the other exam. I wouldn't say we can put on the back foot, but not being as important as the primary focus that you're taking with the exams. So I'm sorry.
I personally would love it because I would hate it. I'd love it if people would stop asking if I could do their taxes for them. Other questions? Good work. That's a wrap on the semester. So thank you very much for good work. I really enjoyed teaching this class. This particular section, not just teaching the class. I always enjoy teaching the class, but I really enjoyed everybody in this class. I will be updating grades on Brightspace. I will probably have final grades posted sometimes middle of next week. But if you have any questions or any concerns, feel free to reach out to me, and best of luck on your finals.